Then the music struck up fast and rhythmic, and the dancers moved round and round. Well, Albert, he just kept shouting, and the revellers, they did a stand. The dancers did their best figures, fast spins, forward tumbles and more. All the while they kept the beat going as they tapped their feet on the floor.
Welcome everyone to DERT of DERTs discussion on dance writing and figure writing. So for anybody who's thinking of writing dances, tried to write dances, we've got three people who have all done it, who've all tried it and have experience of doing that.
Hello, hi everyone. I am Tom Besford and I've been rapper dancing and writing rapper dances. Dances that you might have seen that I have written or had a part in were the one that Star and Shadow first won DERT with. I was heavily involved with writing that one. The Newcastle Kingsman's Swirsdale dance. Medlock rapper, their dances.
Okay, thanks Tom. Laura, can you give us some background, please?
Hi. So I'm Laura English Rose. I have been dancing rapper for about 8 years, so I know that makes me a relative newcomer. And over that time, I've been involved in writing 2 of the 3 dances that Sheffield still have. One of those is a mixture of figures that we made up and figures that we learnt from other places. And then the third one is made up of figures that we entirely wrote from scratch.
Okay, thanks very much. And last but not least, Tom Chafer-Cook.
Yeah, I'm Tom. I think I've been dancing for about 9 or 10 years. Started up our own team in Shropshire called the Shropshire Sharpshins, and in that time we've sort of learnt the hard way about writing new dances from scratch from a team that don't really know what they're doing at all, and making lots of mistakes along the way, so got lots of that experience.
Just thinking about how you go about designing a dance. Which comes first? Do you look for the look of the dance or the individual figures? What's your starting approach?
I think it often has started with the figures, because it starts, we've always written them quite collaboratively, so it involves a lot of messing around basically and playing about and seeing if things work. Maybe there's an idea come from somewhere, or we like the look of something and we want it to look kind of similar, or we know that we want it to have a display, or we want it to be kind of movie aroundy. So often it will start with the figures, and then the dance will follow, in that we may have more figures than we actually end up putting in the dance, and we'll sort of create the figures first and then work out which ones go nicely together or which ones transition nicely into each other. So it's sort of approaching it at the same time, but probably slightly figure-led.
My approach has changed over the years. So when I first started writing dances, it was actually when we founded the Durham University rapper team, and we said, okay, well, what do we want the feel of this to be? And so we selected figures or figure ideas that would fit in with, whether we wanted a high energy one or however we wanted to go with that. But then over the years, I've mainly started by working with the team first and thinking about who they are and what they want to learn. And we've approached it in loads of different ways. So some have been, when Oakenhoof was founded in Littleborough, we thought, well, what are some simple figure constructs which might entertain crowds in the kind of space that they were dancing, and ones that would be relatively easy to pick up but we could expand on. So almost creating a dance where you had deliberate room to swap things out as they grew in their ability to learn to dance. With Hexham Rapper, when we first were setting that up, the dance that they end up taking forward would be something that would look quite complicated in theory, but actually would be the kind of thing that you could teach without having regular supervision, where the group could pick up some key things themselves. As we've reached towards the gas lamp dance, which Medlock do, so the current version of that, we focused entirely on audience reaction and audience engagement, and what would work in a pub compared to what wouldn't work, only in that pub setting, only in this idea of going into new spaces. And so we ended up writing loads of figures for the Medlock dance, almost all of which were scrapped, because we found that by testing it out in a pub, we were keeping a close eye on when the energy dropped from the public and when you needed to put a bit of light and shade into there. So I suspect now, if I was setting out writing a dance from scratch, I'd start with where do I need this to end up? Is this a dance that we need to win dirt with? Is it a dance that we need to win over new rapper people in pubs with? Is it a dance for outside on a Sunday morning, a festival when we're all feeling a little bit worse for wear? All that kind of stuff is going to be really important when I set about writing dances now, but over time it's changed quite a bit.
That's really interesting. With Mons Meg and with the other teams I've danced with, there are sometimes we've created dances that are specifically looking for a distinctive style and built it around that. Tom, Sharp Shins, starting a team from scratch. What did you do to get the dances?
Well, starting from scratch was, quite difficult. First port of call really was YouTube, and we'd just go, oh yeah, I like that bit, I like that bit, I like that bit. Let's choose our favorite bits and then try and link them together in some way. And what we found quite quickly was it didn't really work. It was it was a mishmash of things, of styles, of energy.
So what did you do to then turn that into a dance rather than a collection of figures?
What we then did, moving forward, when we started, having a bit more experience of what we wanted to do, was we'd come up with a structure, a kind of a feel of what our dance would want to be like, not necessarily knowing what figures we were going to put into it, but say, it's got to have these sort of, motifs. We want to kind of have a pause in the middle where we show a lock, and we want to show a lock at the end, and then so there's two halves, and then we kind of split it out that way so that we knew. So in some ways the other way around to just picking figures, we picked up a dance and some points in that dance that we wanted to arrive at, and then worked backwards from there and thought, okay, what figures can we put into these different places that will make it work.
I'm going to pick up on what Laura said. You were talking about working with the team. How much is figure writing a team activity, and how much is it needing one person to drive it?
For us, it's always been very much a team activity. So we'll often, if we're in the process of writing a new dance, usually it'll be a group of us, and we'll just, like I say, sort of just play around a bit with it and actually do it in person with a set and swords and some people on the outside as well, and sort of going, well, what happens if you go that way, and how can you get to the point where you can show this, or how can you get for this to happen? Yeah, take lots and lots of videos and post them all on our Facebook group and see which ones we like and which ones we think work well, and just kind of build it from there. I've never done it where it's been one person writing it and then saying, right, this is the new figure. It's always been really collaborative.
So essentially just experiment once you know what you want, but then just keep playing. Is that the same for you, Tom?
What Laura's describing, absolutely. We've done that with loads of teams, and as a team thing, that's really important. I tend to find there's usually one person, me, which drives it or steers it, but we'll say, okay, well, now we need to think about from here, we're in this position, we want to get to here, and we want to do something that involves making eye contact with the audience, or we want to do something that involves really presenting sword handling skills or whatever. And then collectively we might work on something which gives us a broad brushstrokes, and then we'll tweak it over the coming weeks. When I've written dances in other ways, like the most difficult one that I'd done was a complete paper exercise through reading traditional notations in the anniversary from Cecil Sharp's the publication of the Sword Dance of Northern England Volume 1 that we did in 2009. And that was a total paper exercise of reading Ersden from scratch, rereading Swalwell, understanding what those figures might look like, sort of picturing it in my mind, and then inventing figures that which fused collections of that together. So in that one example for the Swirsdale, I had written the dance on paper first, just in my head. That sort of thing worked, but that was quite a challenging process. But how I normally structure it now tends to be that I'll work with a team. We'll say, okay, well, where do you start? And once you've got the starting position, then we'll talk about the ideas that they want to happen next. So they'll talk about the feel of it. They'll talk about maybe a specific piece of music. We want to dance to this piece of music. And so we think about the phraseology and the music compared to how we want the dance to look at the end, and we'll try and fit that to it. It's whatever works, because everyone who's doing it needs to feel a sense of ownership at the end. And so I think there's no right or wrong for any of this. Experimenting is absolutely the key to it. But I found that even a dance that we know really well and think is complete, it's never really complete. And you can go back to it and you can look at those little moments where there are opportunities to turn a certain way, put an extra bit of a step in, change the timing slightly for how you get into things. And that's not always tightening it up. Sometimes it's deliberately putting space and capacity and time into the dance to give the audience a moment to reflect. But I would say that a dance is probably never finished properly.
Tom, CC, how does that fit with you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm a massive perfectionist. I don't think any of our dances are finished. Yeah, I definitely agree that what we've done is kind of brought things to the whole team, brainstormed things as a team, tried things out, and they've changed a lot from what has been originally come up with.
Of all the figures that you know, which is the one that you wish you'd invented?
Marianne. I wish I'd invented Marianne. It's such a beautiful figure, so many different ways to do it, so many variants that can come off the back of it. Special mentions go to the high spend bulldog and glass. What a figure glass is. You know, and I think we often think about fancy, but actually there's something genuinely beautiful about some of the more simple ones.
Laura?
That's such a hard question. There is a figure I really like, and it's a Whip the Cat figure that I believe is called Rolls. I don't know who wrote it, but it's a lovely figure, and every time I see it, I just like, oh, I love that figure. So that would be my pick.
Tom?
I think what I wish I would have, was around to kind of create would be the monkey dance, the monkey number one dance, just because it's so beautiful, and kind of all of those figures and the way they all flow together. If I had to pick one, I'd probably go for Tits, just because it's I think the traditional Tommy line there is that it's poetry in motion. I agree with that.
I think that is an interesting one to pick, because it's a Phil Heaton figure, which is spread through the rapper world, and people look at it and think it's a traditional figure. So you can see where it's come from and how it's evolved. I
thought you deliberately picked a Phil Heaton figure then, just to kind of give a nod to the great man himself, which I'm sure he'd love. What I find interesting, I just want to jump in on the Stone Monkey dance, because you're right. The Stone Monkey dance is the Stone Monkey number one is such an important and beautiful dance. But what I think is fascinating as well is that when that was written, audiences had an attention span that was about 7 minutes from walking into a pub. And so the dance itself takes 5 minutes with a minute or so of tommying beyond that. When you take it out around pubs and stuff now, I tend to find that as you reach that final third where, the choker into the tumbles and stuff, some audiences are struggling to engage with that. And that progression of how dances need to be written are really interesting, because High Spend number one was a 7-minute dance in itself with a Tommy routine attached to it. Stone Monkey in the early 90s being written by Phil is like a 5-minute dance with a couple of minutes of calling on. And now the newest dances that are coming out are sub 3 minutes, really, in terms of pub access. And so you've got 5 minutes from start to finish to get on and off. Actually, I think attention spans in pubs are shrinking and shrinking. So there could become a time in 10 years' time when we're looking at 1 minute 30 dances.
That's a really interesting point, and something which I hadn't really thought about, but sort of feel intuitively in pubs. You can feel when the attention's waning.
I totally agree with the attention span. I think, we've often approached it as, what's going to fit for DERT length, but we've often started with that. And then consciously tried to make a couple of our dances a little bit shorter for that reason, because whether it's dancing them in a pub or even having done them, done a DERT or something, you can tell when there's either if it's just the end part of the dance because it's quite long, or if there's sections of it that are, dropping energy or drop attention. And we have gone back, and like you say, a dance is never finished. You're always tweaking them and playing with them. So we have gone back several times to some of ours and said, actually, we can cut this bit out of the middle and we don't need to replace it with something, because I think we used to think, if we're taking out a figure, what should we replace it with? But actually now I think we're much better at being a bit more ruthless maybe, and saying we don't need to replace it with something if it, it being shorter is sometimes a good thing and can keep the energy up or can keep the attention span. But it's interesting about thinking about how attention spans themselves are getting shorter. So will that mean that dances get shorter and shorter?
Depends if you're writing for the audience or for yourselves, I suppose.
Which comes back to what was said at the beginning about thinking of what's the purpose of the dance. Notations. Do you keep good notation of your dances, your figures, and do you regularly update them? And where do you keep them?
No, I used to write them down a lot. I used to write down quite detailed notations, but it is 10 times easier now to film it and just make sure you've got some decent camera angles to see what's going on. Sometimes if I'm writing a dance for the first time, I might write a few notes to myself on there and sticking them in some paragraphs. I've obviously got meticulous folders full of details, all electronic because I'm not very good at paper, but I've got all that kind of stuff there. But usually it has YouTube links with timecode stamps on them now, rather than actually writing figures themselves. So an example and saying, it's this bit, but probably we'll do these things differently. Back in the day, I really, before YouTube became so prevalent and it became so easy to get high quality video footage, I certainly wrote them all down. But I think writing down dances has been held in such a kind of, I don't know, almost like a kind of position which people think is really, really important, that once it's written down, it's set in stone. And I really don't like the idea that anything is fixed or that something has greater value or worth because it's been written down. A good dance for me is like a good tune or a good song. Like if it is good, other people will learn it and it will carry on that way.
Do you keep records of Sheffield steel dances?
We don't have the notation for them. It is something that we sometimes think we should do just for kind of our own records and interest, and write them out properly. What we have is it's similar. We mainly use videos. We do have notes, not notations. So we'll write out what we've been doing sometimes just to remind ourselves, or to kind of make little notes about things. And just lots and lots of videos of individual figures, bits of figures, whole dances. I think that as an archive is, if you're coming to learn something, it's often more useful to be able to just watch the video and see how it works. And you can watch the person who's dancing in your position and see what they're doing. And it seems like you should be doing it because it's the proper thing to do. But actually, if you want it to be useful, it's, when we say we might do it for our dances, but that's not because it will be really useful. It's just because it might be a nice thing to have at some point.
I went pretty geeky and wrote all of our stuff down, all of our kind of figures, and put them on our website. So I'm not sure if it's completely up to date, which is always the problem, because things evolve, and then you have to go back and change things. But for me, it was a bit of just the kind of the significance of it and the ceremony, and it's following the tradition of that's how dances from 100 years ago were written down, and so are ours. So that means we're proper. But it's not. I definitely agree that videos are 100% easier to actually understand what's going on.
Imagine you were in the working men's club in Winlayton, and someone was writing a dance and writing some figures, and on the one day that whoever it was, Cecil Sharp or someone, wasn't cycling past and writing down what he did on that day, and if they had iPhones, they would definitely be filming what they'd done, and they would definitely stick it on a Facebook group, just like we all do, that's private, so everyone can comment and see it, rather than write it down formally. And in fact, I bet you many of them didn't write it down. It was only because posh Southerners cycled up to the northeast and wrote it down, and then told them that that is their own tradition, and that's what they have to do. That we even have this concept that because it's written down, it's somehow more important or more valuable or more validated or more real. So I reckon this rapper is social first and foremost, and it's fun, and it's something you do like as a kind of one-off bit of entertainment for yourselves and others, hopefully. So I just think that if the technology was there, then none of this would be written down. We're not writing religious text as much as some of us might want to believe that we are.
I think that is a really good place to end the discussion and to say thank you very much to all three of you. Some really interesting points, some really useful guidance and things to think about for anybody who wants to write dances. Thank you very much.